Good day, everyone. I'm your host, Lee Judge, and welcome to today's webinar entitled Customer Service Worth Seeing, a Visual Solution for Interactive Voice Prompts, brought to you by Jakarta. Our presenters today are Dr. Rhoda Agan, Principal and Owner at Rhoda L. Agan, PhD Communication Associates, and Gali Kovacs, Director of Corporate Marketing at Jakarta. Today we will discuss how to provide visual interactions from traditional telephone voice prompts. Also, we'll cover how Visual IVR technology is changing the way those with hearing challenges interact. Following the presentation, there will be a question and answer session, so please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A window anytime. So let's begin. We'll start our conversation with Gali Kovacs. The presentation's all yours, Gali.
Thank you, Lee. It's great to be here. Thank you, Rhoda, for joining us today.
Sure.
I want to start today by talking about the common IVR frustration. We are all familiar with them, having to call companies and listening to long menus and a lot of choices, and being confused with what we just heard and what we need to actually select. As consumers, we experience this every day. As customer service and call center professionals, we try to diminish such frustrations. But no matter how well we do our job and how well our IVR system is accommodating our consumers and our customers, at the end of the day, it's a system. And systems, just like any other technical function, are much harder to use for people who suffer from hearing difficulties. So this is something we really want to pay attention today and focus on. What was the option 2? How do I go back? Why is this taking so long? Seriously, do I have to start this all over again? Imagine experiencing all of this and being hearing impaired. It makes your life a lot harder. It makes the choices you need to make a lot harder. The speed of the voice at the other end of the line, the need to make fast choices, the difficulties to understand what everyday option is and which option is right for me. Now let's take into consideration, and we'll show you these numbers later, that the hearing impaired are a big part of the population. Companies who invest a lot of time and money in fine-tuning their IVR systems for their customers should really also take into consideration that a large part of their customer base have or suffer from some type of hearing impairment. In the following slide, we will also show you how much this is impacting the bottom line of your business. But before we dive into that, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Rhoda Agan. Dr. Agan will talk about the hearing impaired population and reiterate again the need for IVRs to accommodate such difficulties. Dr. Agan will share with us some statistics that will show us exactly how much of our population suffers from this impairment. And she will also talk about, based on her professional experience, the need to simplify the IVR experience for the hearing impaired population. Dr. Agan is a professor of communicative sciences and disorder at the California State University. Dr. Agan, Rhoda, I'd like to invite you to take it from here, and please share with us some of your great information that you prepared for us.
Thank you, Gali. It's a pleasure to be with you today, and thank you for that kind introduction. I'd be delighted to share some thoughts with you about this particular population that has difficulty with the telephone communication experience. There are many populations that do have trouble, but the hearing population is a rather large portion of our general population, not only in the States, but internationally. But let me begin with looking at the challenge more specifically. The hearing impaired individuals experience a number of unique elements in this challenge when they use the phone. Let's look at the relationship for a moment between communication and hearing. There are several kinds of communication. Many of the listeners might know about this. There's sign language and finger spelling and touching and photographs. And these different ways of communicating are used internationally. They're all over the globe. However, most of us do use speech, or what we also call oral communication. But when we look at speech communication, there are really three elements, not just one element. Speech communication actually looks at the words, and this is the primary means of transmitting a message, of course, but most people tend to just think of the words. Secondly, people think about vocal dynamics, but they don't really think about that very much. But we do need pitch and the highs, the lows, the volume, loud and soft, rate of speech, quality. We do attend to those things. And third, of course, are the visual factors, facial affect, gestures, posture. Obviously, all of us lose visual body cues when we use the telephone. You don't see anything. You miss all of those physical cues. Those of us with normal hearing lose most, if not all, vocal dynamics, the pitches, the highs, the lows, the nuance that really gives strong meaning to the words. So therefore, we're left with only the words, and the words become critical. For the hearing impaired, if you've got difficulty with even that, your communication, in essence, sort of goes out the window. And at the very least, it's unreliable. Telephone communication involves numerous challenges that we typically don't notice until an essential ability is affected. Hearing is just such an essential ability. Visual support to those words then becomes an important option. So if you look at hearing a little bit more specifically, and you get a little better feel for the issue that's central here, this slide sort of tells us that hearing loss, first of all, is a generic term, and there are two major components here. One is those folks who are deaf. Deaf person is not really able to process language through hearing. He or she has little or no usable hearing. A hard of hearing person has residual hearing, sufficient to successfully process some language through hearing, but usually with a hearing aid. So even though we're talking about help with a hearing aid, we have to keep in mind there are still some difficulties even with the use of a hearing aid. So let's look at the population, some of these statistics which actually give us some insight into the numbers we're talking about. So this slide shows us that for thousands of persons, the challenges created by hearing loss begin at birth. And although we say here on the slide 2 to 3 out of 1,000 in the States, the prevalence estimates that may even be higher. A Dutch study of neonatal intensive care units found 32 per 1,000 infants. So the numbers really are a little bit higher, I think, and maybe even rising. When newborns exhibit this hearing loss, by the way, it's often a genetically transmitted hearing impairment. And in this case, the hearing loss is caused by damage to the hearing mechanism before birth. So we call this a congenital loss. There are some genetic conditions in which a baby has normal hearing, and later in childhood or adolescence, hearing becomes progressively worse. When the hearing loss occurs anytime after birth, we call it acquired loss. And most adult persons with hearing loss fall into this second category of acquired loss. This slide that we're looking at now implies that the population of hearing impaired individuals increases with age, and that's true. There are many reasons for that, however. We live in a noisy society. We have seen teens and adults walking in the streets with earphones. Many of us use or have seen others wear Bluetooth earphones. We see them in the supermarkets. We see them everywhere. And there's good evidence that people are listening to headphones longer and louder than at any earlier time in history. Many of us with normal hearing have noticed that the average movie theater sound system and concert amplification they're notably louder than they were even 10 years ago. I recently saw a film called Spotlight. Probably many of you have heard about it. It's pretty popular lately. And we had to tell the manager to lower the volume. It was much too loud for those of us with just purely normal hearing. And it's a film all about conversation. If we look a little bit further at noise in society, and it probably, since noise pollution is significant these days and probably growing, maybe it'd be helpful to elaborate just a little bit further. Noise is typically, I guess we would agree, an unpleasant sound. But most of us describe unpleasant sounds as loud also. So the noise in our society has multiple sources, and some are quite dangerous because of this loudness. Loud noise levels at work, or any loud noise, sudden or chronic, can damage the fragile hearing hair cells in the inner ear. And interestingly, in some persons, chronic noise abuse does not cause hearing loss immediately. It may take even 5 years or sometimes 15 years for the loss to actually occur, even though the initial incident might have been earlier. So intensity or loudness is one of the two main characteristics of sound. Pitch or frequency is the other main characteristic. The loudness issue is really the one of greater concern. The human ear can hear very quiet sounds and extremely loud sounds. Normal hearing includes quiet sounds with a loudness level of 0 to about 20 dB. dB means decibels. And typical conversation, such as I'm using right now, my conversational speech volume is about 60, 65 decibels. A gunshot in the range of 140, 174 decibels will cause immediately permanent damage to the hearing mechanism. Richard Carman, in his handbook on hearing loss and hearing aids, reports an interesting little bit of research. In New York City, sound levels in Times Square and Union Square, he reported, do not drop below 70 decibels at any time. And often, he says, the cacophony is continued at levels over 80 decibels due to heavy traffic. In the New York City subway system, the average levels are 86 decibels, and levels can range from 84 to up to about 112 decibels. One study indicated that a small but substantial percent of New York City subway users will lose a little hearing as a result of a lifetime of riding just on the subway, which is, for some people, it's a little disconcerting. So clearly noise is taking a toll on hearing in society. As we age, hearing acuity may also decrease for other reasons during our aging cycle. Nor hearing may be impaired by smoking, by age, by head trauma, and there are a lot of non-noise related risk factors contributing to hearing loss also. Hearing impairment has been associated with diabetes, for example, or HIV, the human immunodeficiency virus, and a type A personality. There's also been some research about the type A personality and hearing impairment. So hearing acuity might even decrease when we listen to a person who uses a foreign accent or speaks in an unfamiliar dialect of English, including sounds and voice stress patterns with significantly if those patterns differ significantly from our own, that in itself can be a problem for the listener. So if we add those possible reasons for hearing loss, plus the genetically caused hearing impairment loss, we're talking not about 26 million anymore. We're really beginning to talk about 30 million. We really begin to pick up even greater numbers than we thought about in any way before. Let's look at the age factor just for a moment, because that's probably also a rather large number. Growing research is reporting that hearing impaired adolescents concerned about future career barriers state that using the phone is a concern in about 51% of the participants in this particular study. And in the U.S., that was done, I believe, in Australia. And in the U.S., there are about 5 million people between the ages of 18 and 44 with the hearing loss. And that's a prime college age, early working age segment. A study reported last year, 2014, by Mercy College faculty in New York, that their hearing impaired community college students in their study, aged 19 to 27, about 30% of them reported, quote, "I can't hear the faculty or the staff at college." Now these are shopping people and prime learning people in an age group we would think would have good hearing, and indeed we find that their hearing problems significant even in that age level. If we go up a little higher, we look at the implications in a multi-generational workforce, and that's also worth noting. In AARP, the Association of Retired Persons, they've dealt with this topic from time to time. So they say today, for the first time in history, 4 generations are in the workforce. Pre-boomers, boomers, Generation X, millennials, they're all employed in the workforce at the same time. About 45% of this 55-plus age group are working. This year, Kaufman Foundation study found that 26% of all startups were begun by seniors 55 to 65 years of age. That was a surprise to me, and I take it would be to many of the listeners. Now, this is also an international phenomenon. We see similar workforce growth in Sweden, and we see it in Japan, and we also see it in Germany. If we look a little further, AARP tells us something rather interesting. They report that older Americans are, of course, prodigious consumers. Seniors know what other seniors like and need, and they shop. Obviously, then, senior consumers are likely to use the current IVR systems to resolve the various issues that arise when products or accounts need attention and inquiries are made, etc. So as these statistics show in this slide, in America alone, we have a large and growing population of hearing impaired persons who are likely challenged by the almost ubiquitous voiced interactive phone response trees used by large companies everywhere. Their service and their sales programs end up being very much brought to the public by interactive phone response trees. In fact, individuals in their 50s and all the way up to their 90s are using cell phones, iPads, laptops, and other electronic devices right now. AARP very clearly states, indeed, the hearing impaired too, in an attempt to ameliorate the frustration with telephone communication, have been using a range of electronic devices for decades. Depending upon the severity of their hearing loss, these include telephone amplifiers and local telephone relay systems, captioning phone systems, and even video relay systems. Surely the millions of hearing impaired persons internationally who are navigating the familiar customer service hurdles of IVR are eager for frustration relief. They are seeking a better way to meet their telephone communication needs, and it would seem that visual assistance is a likely, viable, and a long-awaited option. So, Gally, that's about all I have to say at this point, and I share the stage with you. Back to you.
Thanks, Rhoda. That was great. Let me continue just one second with my slides. I think you really gave us a great background and a lot of context to what I'm about to present. I think we now all realize that a large part of the population does suffer from this impairment, and it is something that should be thought of, and a visual interaction instead of a voice one can be a great solution here. Before we dive into the actual solution, let's take a little bit a closer look at these numbers, just so we understand exactly how much this is impacting our business. So we know a large population suffers from this impairment, and we know they're most likely very frustrated from the IVR experience. If most of us are, then they're even more. Probably zeroing out, they're hanging up, and they're not happy. And there is a direct effect on profitability for companies here. You can see in some of these numbers that 58% of Americans would never use a company that, that gave them a negative customer experience. That poor customer service equals about $41 billion per year of lost business. That IVR abandonment rates lead to almost 800% increase in cost per contact. And of course, that a loyal customer is worth up to 10 times as much as their first purchase. So it is in everybody's interest to actually accommodate the hearing impaired population. So these are really big numbers, and which got us to think, okay, so how do I really help this population? How do I make life easier for them and not having to deal with the IVR frustration? And what we want to present today and talk about today is the Visual IVR solution. Of course, Visual IVR is well known as an alternative to the traditional voice IVR, but we want to also present again the concept and the benefits that hearing impaired people can actually benefit from. So what is Visual IVR? Visual IVR, as simple as it sounds, basically takes a visual interaction and transforms it, takes a voice interaction and transforms it into a visual interaction. So if we're all used to calling the IVR and listening to all the options, instead of listening, now we're seeing. We're not only seeing, we're touching our way through the menu. So the control is in our hands, and we control the pace, and we can see everything. So everything becomes much more clear. Let's take a look at this for a minute. Think of everything we do when we call the IVR, when we call a company, and the experience that we get. First, we listen. Sometimes we listen to the entire menu option. Then we move the phone away from our head while trying to remember all the options that we just heard. Then we try and choose the option that is best for us, assuming we remember that one. We choose one. We may have chosen wrong. We may have chosen right, but we want to move forward and we want to choose another. That whole experience is very confusing and frustrating, and many customers just end up zeroing out, which means they didn't even get the benefit of smart routing or self-service. So they haven't solved their own problem, and when they do get to an agent, if they haven't hung up, the whole context of everything they did is not visible, and they have to start from the beginning. Now, let's look what happens when Visual IVR is presented instead of a regular voice IVR. Take a look at this screen. With Visual IVR, the same audio IVR experience is presented visually, allowing customers to quickly scan their screen and touch their way through the IVR. This is far quicker and much more efficient. You don't have to listen from beginning to end. You don't have to try to remember what the options are. You're seeing it, and it's right there in front of you, and you're navigating, and you're controlling it. So this is a great experience, especially for people who suffer from hearing impairment. Now, there are a lot of other great benefits that come with this solution. Think about the self-service options that a regular IVR offers. Usually you can get, as you know, as a company and as an IVR programmer who are trying to create the best IVR possible, you can offer maybe 3 or 4 self-service options. With Visual IVR, you can even have 7 levels or 8 without frustrating or confusing the customers, because everything is visible and they control the pace. So self-service options are much more available and are much more effective, and the customer will most likely resolve this issue within the IVR. Also, there's this great feature called the back button. The back button, you know, it's one of those, how did we not think about this before? But when you see the options and you're not sure and you want to go back 2 steps or 3 steps and start again, it's so easy when you just press back. It's not like a voice IVR where you have to press 9 and start everything from the beginning. And lastly, I also want to emphasize another benefit of data entry. When you're on a regular voice IVR experience and you simply cannot enter alphanumeric numbers, so you cannot enter an email or an account number, you have to identify again to the agent. And with Visual IVR, this is another level of self-service and identification that the customer can do on its own within the Visual IVR. So this is the concept, and these are some of the benefits I wanted you to think about. In addition to the Visual IVR, there's what we call in Jakarta our designer tool. The designer tool is basically a tool where a company can expand its self-service options and create more self-service options. So as an organization, you can either choose to take your existing voice IVR menu and give them a visual presentation, or you can say, okay, I have this great platform, why don't I expand the self-service options? I talked about this in the previous slide. And it doesn't necessarily have to be something that takes months, and it doesn't need to involve coding or IT. The designer that Jakarta offers is actually a tool that can be used by marketing, that can be used by business people. It has a drag and drop interface, and it has no coding, which means anybody without technical background can actually create more self-service menus and more self-service layers and increase the offering on the Visual IVR. On the business side, this means that if there's a very fast go-to-market, you know, in today's world, we have to keep up the pace and we have to change our offering and our promotion. And with the designer, we can easily do that, and we can publish it not only on our website, but also on the Visual IVR, on the Enterprise app, on the chat. So companies can really shorten the length of calls or avoid them altogether by creating a more in-depth and enhanced self-service experience for customers. And when you think about people with hearing impairment, this even has a greater impact on them, because they, as much as they can, want to solve their own problem visually by looking and not having to speak to someone, which is literally sometimes impossible. So this is something that really should be considered as you consider a Visual IVR solution. So we talked about Visual IVR. Now let's talk about where is it accessible. Let's say a company adopts this solution. Where do my customer actually access the Visual IVR? I mean, I'm used to them calling the 1-800 number. What happens now? So this slide lays out a few options of how customers can access the Visual IVR. What we call the voice engagement is calling your regular 1-800 number. What a lot of companies we find do there is actually add an option. For example, click 8 if you want to get a text message with the visual interaction. When the customer does that, he actually gets a text message, an SMS message into his phone. He opens that message, clicks on the link, and the visual interaction starts immediately. And if we want to accommodate the hearing impaired population, which doesn't necessarily call the 1-800 number, we can simply advertise this option digitally on our website, on our app, with banners and with text ads that say that we now have a visual option, and all you need to do is call this number and click 8. So even a hearing impaired person doesn't have to listen to the entire menu. Another option is for a web engagement. Most of our customers, when they're browsing the web and they end up on our website, they usually go to a contact us page. At this point, they see the 1-800 number, they pick up the phone and they call. What a company can do in this case, instead of presenting the 1-800 numbers, it can have a link to a visual interaction. And basically, the interaction starts right there and there. So instead of calling, the entire menu that a customer would otherwise hear on the phone is now visible to him on the website, and he can start navigating through the self-service option. Similar to that, the Visual IVR can also be embedded into an app. So if you are a company that has a very popular enterprise app and your customer base is really using that app a lot and is maybe spending more time there than in your website, then instead of your traditional contact us buttons and engagements on the app, you actually have a contact us that links into a visual interaction. So we're getting close to the end, and we talked about what Visual IVR is and why it's beneficial, especially for people with hearing impairment, and how a company can really implement this solution to expand self-service and what ways it can be accessed by customers. And before we finish, I really want to spend some time on these key benefits that are, from my perspective, are really the key takeaways for this solution. So first of all, it's on the go. When you have to talk and hear someone, you can't really always do that on the go. You have to be in a quieter place. You're dependent on background noises. And when you're interacting with a company through Visual IVR, you can literally do it from anywhere because it's visual, it's not audio. As I said before, you can see and choose your options. It's much easier to navigate. You control the pace. You can click back when you're not sure and start over again. You don't necessarily have to go all the way to start the menu from the beginning. Another important thing that Visual IVR offers is the connectivity to the call center. So the entire self-service transaction on Visual IVR can either end there with the customer solving his problem, or the customer may need to continue an interaction with an agent. When we're talking about the hearing impaired population, they would probably prefer chatting with somebody. So with Visual IVR, you can easily transfer to a chat when you need an agent on the other side, and that agent can literally see the entire Visual IVR navigation history that the customer has gone through before the chat started. So the interaction with the chat agent is quicker because you don't have to start everything from scratch. And the conversation or the chat can literally start again from where the customer left it off. So there's no need to repeat information. And another thing to point out that at this point, the chat agent that is chatting with the hearing impaired can not only see the entire history of his self-service transaction, it can also provide more help. We call this our collaborative features. The agent can share documents, can send links, can send images, can even help a customer fill out a form. So this entire package together of Visual IVR and the added benefits together with this solution is really a great fit for our customers who are a big part of this population who suffer from hearing impairment, and when we want to offer an alternative for the traditional IVR. Key points that we should take from this conversation. Obviously, we talked about the business impacts, and Rhoda gave us some great background and numbers on how many people suffer from this disability and what type of hearing disabilities there are out there. Telephone communication is hearing dependent, and it's very challenging for people who suffer from hearing impairment. Visual IVR offers hearing impaired people an effective and rapid customer service experience. It's something different. It's something that they haven't experienced before, and it's a chance for us as a society to really think of people with disabilities and provide an alternative. There's a rich menu. There's ease of navigation. There's a lot of self-service capabilities that I talked about, which means they will most likely be able to solve their own problem. So this is why we really think Visual IVR, when it comes to the hearing impaired population, is really a great fit. And from the business side, as we said, at the end of the day, it's a win-win, and it's really something that organizations should consider when they strategize their customer service offering. And Lee, I'll hand it over to you because we're done with the slides, so we can probably continue with the Q&A now.
Okay. Well, thank you for your valuable insights on visual solutions for interactive voice prompts, both Rhoda and Gali. Due to the high participation in this webinar, we're going to answer as many questions as possible from the Q&A window, and then the remaining questions will be responded to you individually after the event. We'll now answer a few questions that have already been added to the Q&A window. The first question here, it's probably for Rhoda. The question is, can't a hearing aid resolve a hearing loss?
Sure.
Oh, wait, Rhoda, I think you muted yourself. Hold on one moment. All right, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Audiologists, who are the specialists who work with hearing evaluation and hearing aid application and so on, audiologists agree that no matter how advanced the hearing aid, and today we have extraordinary hearing aids with Bluetooth, etc. In most cases, the aid cannot restore completely normal hearing, except in very mild losses.
Okay. Another question we have here, I think this is Gali. How do my customers access the Visual IVR session?
So we actually touched this in one of the slides. The Visual IVR, the most popular way for customers to access it is actually by getting a text message. So most companies that we have worked with who have adopted this solution have kept their Visual IVR in parallel to the regular audio IVR. So when people call in, there is actually an option that enables them to click, usually it's 8, and get a text message with a link. And when they click that link, the visual interaction starts. For the hearing impaired and for other types of disabilities, a lot of companies tend to advertise this option. So people don't have to listen to the entire menu, but they know when they call in to click 8 immediately because they saw it on a banner or in some sort of advertisement beforehand. Another option is, of course, through the website, instead of presenting the 1-800 number, just to present the link into a visual interaction. And the same way in an enterprise app, there are companies where the enterprise app is highly used, so they embed the Visual IVR within that app so the users can enjoy it from there as well and have the entire connectivity experience from the Visual IVR in the app to the call center or chat if needed.
Okay, excellent. Rhoda, we have a question here that says, why would a hearing impaired person use a video relay system on the telephone?
Okay. Persons use a video relay system want to see a speaker, especially sign language users. And sign language users have different sign language all over the world, but they all share this one interest in wanting to see the speaker. They want to see the hand signs and facial affect that accompanies a signed phrase to help send the intended message. Just the repetition of a sign, hand sign, can mean something different than just seeing it one time. Video message services are available from a couple of companies, and they are used across the United States for sure, and are probably internationally as well.
Okay. We're going to take about 2 more questions and then allow our attendees to get back to their busy days. The next question here, Rhoda, I think it touches on something you mentioned earlier. They ask, how does a type A personality make a person more likely to have a hearing loss?
Yes, that's a good one. It has been found that individuals who are more prone to stress have a higher reaction to stress, may be more likely to develop temporary hearing loss than those who are less stress-prone when they're presented with the same amount of noise. Blood flow is reduced when your muscles are stressed, and the muscles become more tense, and we know that from various exercise research. And this applies to the circulation of the inner ear and the head as well. It's not just the arms and the legs that experience this in their muscles, that we also have muscles in the head and other tissues which do need the circulation that is so important for hearing. There's research on this topic, but this particular comment I got from Carmen, who writes extensively, Dr. Carmen, in Hearing Loss and Hearing Aids. He elaborates about the type A personality.
Very interesting. Thank you, Rhoda. Let's see, the last question here, it's about Visual IVR, so Gali, I'm sure you can answer this one. How long does it typically take to implement a Visual IVR solution?
You'd be surprised, Lee, but it's pretty quick. It's a matter of actually weeks, not months. Typical companies usually start with just visualizing their existing menu. So just reusing VXML scripts and just taking existing menu and offering them visually in a matter of really weeks. And then other companies who want to expand the self-service options and create more trees and more options on the existing Visual IVR by using the designer that I presented before, which, as I said, is a drag and drop tool that requires no coding and no IT dependency. They actually do that pretty quickly, so we see a lot of fast go-to-market campaigns that are actually being implemented very quickly. So I would say in a matter of weeks.
Excellent. Great information, both Rhoda and Gali. Well, this concludes our webinar entitled Customer Service Worth Seeing, a Visual Solution for Interactive Voice Prompts. Thanks again to Dr. Rhoda Agan of Communication Associates and also to Gali Kovacs of Jakarta. If there are any questions that we were unable to answer during today's sessions, we will respond directly to you after the event. We hope that you have gained valuable insight into Visual IVR for the hearing impaired and how easily you can utilize it to enhance your organization's customer service. A replay of the event will be available soon on Jakarta.com, along with a download link to the presentation. Once again, thank you for attending today. Please visit us at Jakarta.com or visual-ivr.com and have a wonderful day.